So are some of you here for the first time? A few? Okay, well, welcome. Thank you for coming. And what we usually do here on Tuesday night is we start with a meditation, and that'll go for 20-30 minutes. Then I talk a bit about meditation and answer questions if anyone has a question. Then we have a break, 10-15 minute break, and then there's the second part of this session. I give a talk about some aspect of Buddhism. So you are welcome to stay for both parts of the evening if you wish, but if you don't want to stay for the talk, you can leave after the break. So feel free to do as you wish. So of those who are new, have any of you not done meditation before? Anyone who's never meditated before? You all have some experience. Yeah, okay. So we've been having this class a few weeks now, and we've been doing mainly meditation on the breath, using the breath as a focal object, an object to focus our mind, our attention on. In a way, this can be compared to having an anchor. You know, a ship needs an anchor to be able to keep it in one place. When you don't want to sail the ship, right? You want to keep the ship in the harbor or in the wherever. Then you need this anchor to keep it steady in that one place so that it doesn't float away with the wind and the waves and so on. So our mind is somewhat like the ship in that, you know, it can be carried away by many different thoughts, memories, fantasies, emotions, and so forth. And when our mind is like that, it's kind of very unsteady, it's very scattered, and sometimes our mind can just go by itself into places, into states of mind, ways of thinking, and so on that could be quite disturbing, troubling, and lead us to feel, you know, disturbed or unhappy, and so on. So it's helpful to have an object that keeps our mind in the present, like present moment, present place, so that it's not wandering all over the place. And so the breath is a good object. There could be other objects that you use, but the breath is a good object because, for one thing, it's there all the time. We're always breathing. Our body is just breathing by itself constantly, 24 hours a day, even when we're unconscious. So the breath is always there. We don't have to bring to mind some idea or some image or sound to use as an object. All we have to do is focus on the breath that's constantly going in and out. And that's useful because then even when we're not in a formal situation like this, doing formal meditation, but in your daily life, even when you're at work or when you're traveling to and from work or you're with people or wherever you are, whatever you're doing, your breath is there. So you can learn to bring your awareness to your breath, to your breathing, this process of breathing, coming in and going out. And that can really help you to come back to the present moment, come back to the present place, and calm yourself down in case your mind is getting somewhat disturbed, unhappy, agitated, upset, whatever. So it's a good object to learn to focus on and then come back to when we need to. So that's basically what we do in the meditation. We sit quietly and pay attention to our breathing coming in and going out. Then naturally the mind doesn't stay on the breath for very long because it's nature. The nature of our mind is to be very busy, to think of many different things and so on. So the natural tendency is to wander away from the breath. But when we notice that, we try the best we can to let go of the other object and come back to the breath. So we keep coming back to the breath again and again and again. And last week, I also introduced another practice which can be used as a meditation on its own, but it could also be used as a preliminary before other kinds of meditations. And that is a body scan, going through the body and just noting, paying attention to whatever sensations we notice as we go through the body. And that's a really helpful way to start a meditation session, because it's bringing our awareness, our attention here into our body. Much of the time, most of the time, our attention is directed outside of ourselves. When we're, during our day, there's so many things going on around us, people and activities, and also we have our phones and our internet and just many, many things that are taking our attention outside of ourselves. And so when we practice meditation, what we're trying to do is bring our attention home to our own mind, to our own body, right here, and mainly to our mind, so that we can have a better understanding, a better awareness of what's going on in our mind. And coming back to our body and kind of going through the body and feeling the sensations in the body is a helpful way of bringing our awareness, bringing our attention here, and then it becomes easier to focus on the mind. So I thought we'll do that again this evening. I'll take you through another guided body scan. Now, the way I did it last week was to go from the top down, starting with the top of the head and going down. It's also possible to do it the other way, starting from the bottom and going up. I personally prefer top down. I like that. But if you're doing this on your own, you could do it in whichever way you wish. Often in yoga, in like hatha yoga, the only type of yoga that I know, they have a practice of starting from your feet and then going up and relaxing the body part by part. So you're free to do that on your own if you wish, but tonight I'll lead it the other way, going top down. Also, if you're doing this practice on your own, you can do it lying down. You don't have to sit, but when we do relaxation or meditation lying down, then there's a little danger of falling asleep. Sometimes it's hard to stay awake. So the advantage, that's one advantage of doing it in a sitting position. It's a little harder to fall asleep. Okay, so try to make yourself comfortable, whether you're sitting in a chair or you're sitting on the floor. Try to keep your body in a straight position, not leaning one way or the other, to one side or the other, or the front or the back. And try to keep your back straight if you can. If you don't have some injury or disability that would make it difficult to keep your back straight. Keeping the back straight helps the mind to be more clear and focused. And if you're sitting on the floor, have your legs crossed in whatever way is comfortable for you. If you're sitting on a chair, just have your 2 feet flat on the floor. And you can have your hands resting in your lap or resting on your knees as you prefer. Now let's start by taking a few deep breaths, breathing in slowly as much as you can, but not to the point where it gets uncomfortable. Then breathing out slowly. Just let your breath go out in a slow and steady stream. So do that 3 times for 3 breaths. And you might want to imagine that if there's any tension anywhere inside of you, in your body or in your mind, imagine it going out with the exhalation of the breath. And then just continue breathing in a natural rhythm. Just allow your body to breathe as it normally does without interfering with it. So try not to control your breathing or interfere with your breathing, but just let it happen. And now for the body scan, put your awareness at the top of your head. Feel any sensations there may be at that point. And also, as we're doing this body scan, going through the body, if you notice there's tension in any part of the body, see if you can let go of the tension. You could imagine that it melts and flows down and sinks into the earth, disappearing, leaving your body free of tension. Then move your awareness into your forehead. Let the forehead relax. And then feel your eyes. Relax your eyes. And then relax the other facial muscles so that your whole face relaxes. And then move your awareness around to the right side of the head. Relax any tension there. And then the back of the head. Then the left side of the head. And now see if you can go into your head, the middle of the head, the inside of the head, where we have our brain, our skull, to see if you notice any sensations inside your head. And if you notice any tension, see if you can let it go. And then let your awareness move down into your neck and throat. And then downwards into your back, the upper part of your back. Then continue to the middle part of the back. And the lower lower part of the back. And then from there, shift your awareness to the front part of your body, starting with your chest. And let your awareness travel down through the front part of your body, through your torso, feeling whatever sensations you might have in that part of the body, in your chest and abdomen, stomach, relaxing any tension you might find. And then move your awareness into the pelvic area. Relax any tension you may feel there. And now let your awareness travel down through your right leg. First the top part of the leg, the knee, the lower part of the leg, the ankle, foot, then shift your awareness to the left leg, starting with the upper part of the leg, and then the knee, calf, and then the ankle and foot of the left leg. So now shift your awareness to the upper part of your right arm. Let your awareness travel down from there to your elbow, on the lower part of the arm. And then wrist, hand, fingers. And then shift your awareness to the left arm, starting with the upper part of the arm. Then moving down towards the elbow. And then the lower arm. And again, the wrist, hand, and fingers. So now we've gone through the whole body and tried to just lightly touch the different parts of the body and let go of any tension anywhere in the body. So do your best to keep your body relaxed and free of tension for the rest of this meditation session. So now for the main part of the meditation, we're going to use the breath, the breathing, as our focal object, like an anchor to keep our mind anchored to the present, this place, this time. But of course, it's natural that the mind will wander away. Other thoughts will come up, memories of the past or plans for the future, fantasies. That's just the normal way that our mind works. We're thinking a lot all the time. So it's very hard to stop that. So don't be surprised if lots of thoughts come up. Just accept them. Don't try to fight them, and don't get upset with yourself for having them. Just be aware of them. Have a kind of open, non-judgmental curiosity about whatever comes up in your mind. Just notice it. But then try not to get caught up thinking the thoughts. Instead, you can just say to yourself, oh, there's a thought, or thinking, and then try to let it go, put it aside, and come back to the breath. And don't worry if you have to keep doing this again and again and again. That's completely okay. And it doesn't mean you can't meditate. That itself is meditation. Coming back to the object again and again and again is meditation. So just try to be patient and just keep coming back and try to stay with the breath as long as you can, even if it's just 1 or 2 or 3 breaths before your mind runs away. That's okay. But see if you can make it a little longer, maybe 4 breaths, 5 breaths. And you can count your breaths if you want. That's a technique that some people use to stay focused on the breath. So you can say to yourself, breathing in, breathing out 1, breathing in, breathing out 2, and then keep counting up to 5, and then go back to 1. Or if you're more experienced, you can go up to 10 or even up to 20 as you wish. It's also a good idea to go back to 1 whenever your mind wanders away. And that way you can get a sense of how long you're able to stay focused on the breath before you lose it and the mind wanders away to something else. tickle in my throat. It's very annoying. So I want you to know that this type of meditation is just one of many different types of meditation. And I think that's useful to know because everyone is different. And for some people, this kind of meditation may be just right, very suited to them and their needs. But it may be that other people don't get anything out of it and don't like it. And so if that's the case, then don't give up meditation altogether. Maybe you just need to try some other methods before you find one that does suit you. I've a few times I've met people who I really love this kind of meditation, but a few people have told me that when they try to do this meditation on the breath, their mind is just so out of control and crazy, and they're not able to get any kind of peace of mind. But they find some other practice that does work for them. For example, just a few weeks ago, someone told me that he listens to mantras. He has mantras playing and listens to mantras. And when he does that, he's able to concentrate really well and, get some degree of concentration. And I remember once I was teaching meditation to a group of people, and we were doing this meditation for a while, and then I guided another meditation practice that involved visualization. And as one person told me afterwards, that she was so happy that we did this visualization practice because she'd been a smoker and she was trying to give up smoking. And she found that when we did just the breathing meditation, because it was so simple, there wasn't that much going on, just watching the breath, she just kept thinking about smoking, wanting to have a cigarette. But when we did the visualization meditation, it was a little bit more complicated. There were more things to keep her mind occupied. Then she wasn't, thinking about cigarettes. So she had a better experience with that. So I'm just saying that because just in case, it's good to try it for a while. Don't give up after the first time. But if you, after trying it for some time and you feel, it doesn't seem to be getting you anywhere, it doesn't seem to be working very well, maybe you feel frustrated, then it might be a good idea to try another practice. There are other practices. There's visualization practices, there's recitations, and there's analytical meditation. We'll try that one time just so you get a taste of that. But that meditation involves using our thought, not just letting our mind think about anything and everything, but using thought in a directed way, usually related to some aspect of the Buddha's teachings. So we think about something that the Buddha taught and try to get a better understanding of it. And the whole purpose of that kind of meditation is to bring about a positive transformation of our mind, so that our way of thinking and our way of seeing things and our way of living in our life will become better, become improved as compared to before. I really like that kind of meditation as well. I find it really helpful. And also it's good for me because my mind is very busy anyway. It's very active. So it's a way of using this active energy in my mind in a constructive way. So that's one thing I wanted to share with you. Another thing I wanted to mention was there's one kind of danger that we can sometimes fall into with meditation, and that is having expectations. One of my teachers, Lama Yeshe, used to say to us, don't have any expectations when you meditate, just do it. Did I talk about this before? I can't remember. Okay. Anyway, it doesn't hurt to hear it again, because it's so easy to slip into that. And it's a bit of a trap. So what I mean by having expectations is that We may have heard stories of, what other people experience in meditation. And then we get interested and think, oh yeah, I would like to have that experience too. And that may be at least part of our reason, our motivation for practicing meditation, is to be able to replicate somebody else's experience. Or we might just have our own ideas about certain experiences that we would like to have. And we're hoping that if we meditate, we'll have those experiences. So this is a danger, because if we have this kind of attitude, it's a kind of grasping, a kind of wanting. Yeah, we're sitting there. Even it may not be so obvious. It may be very, very subtle, but there's this subtle thing going on in the mind of kind of waiting, watching. When is it going to happen? When is that wonderful experience going to happen to me? If we have that state of mind of waiting and kind of wanting something to happen, that itself creates a barrier, an obstacle, a hindrance to being able to experience the benefits of meditation. Because there are definitely beneficial experiences that can occur when we practice meditation, but they will not occur because we're grasping at them, because we're trying to get them. Does that make sense? So having this grasping attitude actually pushes them away, makes it less likely that they will happen. And so that's why they say it's best not to have any expectations and just do it, because then your mind is free of that kind of grasping attitude. But it's not easy to do that. It's very hard. I think our whole life, we're hoping, wanting, expecting good things to happen to us. We're always looking out for good things, good experiences. And so it's very hard to not have that also when we're practicing meditation. And also, like I say, it can be kind of sneaky, it can be subtle and not so obvious, so we may not be aware of it. I remember this one time I was teaching a group of people. It was a meditation course for 10 days. And so we're doing a lot of meditation, and there was also a lot of teaching all day long for 10 days. And I had told these people about this. I said, don't have any expectations, and da, da, da. And on the third day of this course, this one young man came up to me and he said, I've been meditating for 3 days now and nothing has happened. I said, well, what did you think was going to happen? And he said, I don't know, but something should have happened by now. He thought other people were having fantastic experiences. And I don't know how he got that idea, because they were supposed to be keeping silence. They were supposed to be, whether they were or not, I don't know. They were maybe sneaking off in the bushes and talking. But I suspected that he was just fantasizing. He was kind of maybe opening his eyes and looking around and thinking, wow, all these people are having these great experiences and nothing's happening to me. So that's just an example of how we can fall into this kind of trap. So he was sitting there, wanting something to happen and then feeling disappointed because nothing was happening. But actually, that something was happening, but it wasn't what he wanted. He was getting a chance to see his own mind, to see this kind of grasping attitude. Yeah. And he even said, I'm not going to keep meditating if nothing's going to happen. So he was, thinking of leaving the course after 3 days because he wasn't getting some experience that he wanted to have. So I tried to remind him about this problem, of having expectations. So it's something to look out for. And this is actually one way we might notice that it's happening to us. If we do find ourselves thinking, well, I've been meditating for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 1 month or 5 months or whatever, and I don't seem to be getting anywhere. So if we have that kind of thought coming up, that kind of feeling coming up, that might be an indication that unconsciously or subconsciously we we're hoping for, expecting, wanting, grasping at something to be happening. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Now, it's a little tricky because Buddhism does, and other spiritual traditions as well, they do talk about the benefits of meditation, the results of meditation, things that you can experience as a result of doing meditation. So those are there, those do exist. And it's not wrong to be meditating in order to achieve those, but it's more a question of an attitude. It's like, okay, if we want those experiences to be happening right now, today, this week, this month, that's the problem. You know, that kind of grasping attitude, that's the problem. On the other hand, I think of it a bit like if you go mountain climbing. Have you ever gone mountain climbing? I guess you don't have mountains in Denmark. Or you might go to the Alps or the Himalayas or whatever. So there's this mountain that you want to get to the top of, and maybe it takes many hours or maybe even many days. If you're making this trek, this journey, you know, with this impatient attitude, you know, when am I going to get there? I really want to get there. Like, you know what I mean? It's like grasping at the result, the goal that you're trying to achieve. Then you probably won't enjoy the journey very much. Yeah. On the other hand, if you think, okay, I know there's the top of the mountain, I'm going to get there at some point in time, but it's going to take a while, so I'm going to enjoy myself along the way. So then you'll probably have a better time on this journey, on this trek. So I think it's similar if we can try to bring that kind of attitude into our meditation practice. There are results that we can achieve through practicing meditation, but you know, they may be a long way off. And having this grasping attitude, wanting them to happen right away or within a certain period of time isn't so helpful. And like I say, it can actually create a barrier to having those experiences. We're like pushing them away from us. So instead, if we can just relax and experience whatever is happening, be happy with whatever is happening. Don't judge your meditation. This is a good one. This is a bad one. Just accept whatever is happening and try to be like that person going to the top of the mountain, but, you know, enjoying each step of the way rather than wanting to be there, and, you know, as quickly as possible. Does that make sense? So this is talking about a little bit of a subtle point, but try to be on the lookout for it in yourself, in your own mind, in your own experiences. And like I say, probably the best sign of this problem happening is if you do have feelings of frustration or discouragement, or even think about giving it up because you're not getting what you thought you would get out of it. Any questions about that? Does it sound okay? Does it sound reasonable? Okay. So how about if we have a break now for about 10 minutes, and then those who wish to stay for the topic for tonight's talk is, I'm going to say a little bit about the Four Noble Truths that we have been talking about the last few weeks, and then move on to the topic of rebirth, reincarnation, which is quite a hot topic in Buddhism. And if we have time, a little bit about karma as well. So if you're new here, upstairs there's some drinks, coffee and tea and some cookies, refreshments. So I'll bring this when it's time to come back down. So for these Tuesday evenings, I thought to start by just giving some basic Buddhist teachings, explaining something about the Buddhist path for those who may not be very familiar with Buddhism. So that'll be for the first 10 weeks. And then after that, I'll talk about emotions, how to work with disturbing emotions. So I hope that what I'm going through now isn't boring for you. I just think it's helpful to have some understanding of what Buddhism is all about, what Buddha taught. Maybe for some of you, you've heard these things before, but I hope I will say something new, something you haven't heard before. So the last couple of weeks, I was talking about the Buddha's life and his first teaching, in which he explained the Four Noble Truths and also the Eightfold Path. So we did that over the last couple of weeks. And these teachings are quite important, especially the Four Noble Truths, because it's a way of summarizing the Buddha's main message. Everything else he taught in his life can be sort of fit into these Four Noble Truths. So it gives us a good framework to understand the essential message of the Buddha and his teachings. But the teaching on the Four Noble Truths can also be somewhat challenging because the first two truths are about suffering and the causes of suffering, delusions in our mind, disturbing emotions, karma. So those topics can be somewhat depressing when we hear about them. The second two truths are more positive and optimistic. They talk about the possibility of becoming free of suffering and attaining liberation, enlightenment, and so on. So that's very uplifting and inspiring. But if we feel somewhat uncomfortable with the first truth, especially the truth of suffering, and then the causes of suffering, and we want to not hear about that, not think about that, not meditate on that, and only meditate on the nice part, the good stuff, the enlightenment, and so on, then that's not going to really work. Because, for example, I mentioned this book of Thich Nhat Hanh, one of his recent books called No Mud, No Lotus, which is all about how to transform suffering. And he says that just as a lotus flower, which is a very, very beautiful flower, but it will only grow in a place that's muddy. It needs mud to be able to grow. And in the same way, the state of enlightenment, this very wonderful, beautiful, blissful, pure state of mind that the Buddha attained, and he taught that we can attain it too. But to be able to attain that state of mind, we have to be willing to go through suffering and difficulties. We can't just avoid problems and difficulties and just suddenly reach enlightenment. So he speaks about suffering in a very positive way, the positive side of suffering. We inevitably we have problems, we have suffering, but it doesn't have to be bad. It can be useful, it can be helpful for us to develop qualities that we need to become free of suffering and become enlightened, and then be able to help others as well. So that the main message of that book is to learn how to deal with suffering and problems and difficulties in a positive way. And I think this kind of idea or theme is found in other religious and spiritual traditions as well, at least the ones that I've heard of. When you hear about the great masters, the great saints of all the spiritual traditions and religions, they went through difficulties. They didn't have an easy time. It's very difficult to find an example of somebody who reached some high spiritual achievement without going through difficulties. So it seems to be a inevitable part of the path. That doesn't mean we should look for difficulties. We should create difficulties for ourselves. They're already there. But the point is learning how to deal with them in a skillful way, because that's the real problem. The problem isn't so much the problem or difficulty or suffering that's happening to us, but more how we are dealing with it, how we are relating to that. And we can see this in our own experience. We've probably all had experiences where maybe some tragedy happens, some crisis happens, some problems happens that affects a number of different people. But you can see that not everyone reacts to it in the same way. Some people get really, really upset and even fall apart, even have a nervous breakdown, maybe start talking about suicide. Whereas other people are able to handle it in a more calm, peaceful way and not get so upset, and maybe even have humor. You know, sometimes people have a really good sense of humor. Even when there's difficulties and problems, they're able to stay humorous about it. Have you noticed that? That, you know, different people have different ways of responding and dealing and meeting with problems and difficulties. So if you can see that in real life, then that shows that it isn't so much the circumstances or the event itself, but more what happens in the mind, what happens in individual people's minds in response to, in relation to that situation. And the good news is that we can learn to handle problems and difficulties in a better way, to have more, there's a term that's I've heard now in psychology, they talk about resilience. Have you heard of resilience? Resilience. It's defined as the ability to withstand or recover quickly from difficult conditions. So it's been identified as a positive quality, a good quality. Like, for example, somebody loses a job. Okay, so, you know, for some people, losing a job could cause them to become very, very depressed, maybe suicidal, right? Another person could lose a job and not react that way, be okay about it. Yeah, have you seen that happen? So it's not so much the loss of the job, but how the person responds to it, how the person deals with it. And so this quality of resilience, this ability to deal with problems and difficulties without totally falling apart, but be able to bounce back, you know, be able to handle them better and bounce back more quickly. We can learn how to do this, okay? And I'm sure in psychology there are ways, methods one can use to train in this, but Buddhism also has methods we can learn and practice to be able to make good use of problems and difficulties and even transform them into the path. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about this tonight to give you some ideas, but then when we get to that next part of the course, and I'm talking about disturbing emotions, that will also cover this topic in more detail. So one thing that we can do to begin with would be to just look at our own mind and try to get an understanding of how we deal with problems that happen to us in our life. So it could be some small problem, relatively, like getting a headache or losing something or somebody damaging something that belongs to you. So when some unwanted, unpleasant event happens in your life, how do I respond? Am I able to, accept it relatively calmly, or do I get really upset? Do I get angry? Okay, so just check to see if we have ways of responding that are maybe not so wise, not so healthy, not so positive. And just some examples of responses that are not so helpful would be denial or avoidance or escape. So when there's a problem and we feel, I can't handle this, I can't deal with this, we might just try to avoid it, avoid dealing with it. And there's many different ways we can avoid. We can run away. Eating, drinking, getting intoxicated, entertainment, work. Also, keeping yourself really, really busy so you don't have to face this difficult situation. Anyway, finding some kind of escape, attempt to escape, I should say. It doesn't really work because you can't really want to run away from problems. They're there. So you can temporarily go out and get drunk or, watch a movie and just get totally absorbed in that. But, eventually you have to come back and face this problem. So just check to see if that's something you might do. And if it does, if it is something that you do, just ask yourself, does this work? Is it helpful? And then another response that we might have is to just sit with a problem, but become so overwhelmed, not so much by the problem but itself, but by our emotions, our emotional reactions to it. So we may become depressed, we may feel in despair, hopeless, as if, this problem is going to be there forever, it's never going to go away. Have you ever noticed that? A problem happens and it seems like this is it. It's going to be there forever. So that's something else that doesn't help. So those are just a few examples of somewhat unwise or unskillful ways of dealing with problems when they happen. And just a few ideas from the Buddhist teachings that can be helpful in dealing with these problems. One is to remind ourselves of impermanence. So this is something that the Buddha talked about a lot, how things are impermanent. That means they're changing all the time. So actually, all the things in us and around us are impermanent. Our bodies are impermanent. Our minds are impermanent. All our thoughts, our feelings. That means they're changing all the time. Nothing is fixed. Nothing is frozen. Nothing is static and unchanging anywhere in our whole being, in our body and mind. Everything is going through changes all the time. And the same with all the things in the world around us, other people, other beings, everything. It's just its nature. That it's changing. So nothing is fixed. Nothing is permanent. And it may take a while to get a feeling of that, a sense of that. But for me, it's really, really helpful just to remind myself of the impermanent nature of things. So when there's a problem that happens, I can contemplate, well, the problem itself is impermanent. Whatever the situation is, the circumstances are, they're not going to be there forever. They're going to change. And also, I'm impermanent. So my thoughts and my feelings, even if I'm feeling upset or angry or depressed or whatever, those feelings are impermanent. They're not going to be there forever. They'll eventually go away. So this is something you might try when you're facing a problem, just to understand, because this way you're looking at the problem in a different way. You're having a different perspective on the problem instead of seeing it as permanent. It's going to be there forever and ever and ever. To remind yourself, it's not permanent. It's not going to be there forever. And in case you have difficulty believing that, you can think of past problems that you went through and how maybe they were there for a while in your life, but eventually they passed. There's no problem that's there forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. Things come and things go. Another thing is that suffering and problems are not necessarily bad things, but they can be used in ways that help us to grow. So one example of that, and Thich Nhat Hanh talks about this in his book, and it's also in other texts, that when we go through problems ourselves, this gives us the opportunity to have a better understanding of other people who have similar problems. And in that way, opens our heart to have more love, more compassion, more empathy, and maybe even feel inspired to help other people. So this is a good, good quality or advantage of suffering, going through problems and difficulties, because then we have the chance to have compassion for others. And I think too, if you look at people in the world who do have a lot of compassion, I don't know about all of them, but many of them probably have been through a lot of difficulties themselves. So they know what it's like to suffer. And that enables them to have compassion for others, to understand the suffering of others, and then work to help others with their suffering. So I think, if you never go through a particular problem yourself, it's very difficult to really understand others who are going through that problem. Like, for example, depression. There's so many people in the world who suffer from depression, especially in the West. And people who never experienced depression have a hard time understanding what it's like to be depressed. And because they don't understand it themselves, they can sometimes be maybe a bit unkind, even like somebody who I know who is suffering from depression would try to talk to others about it, and they would say things like, "Well, just snap out of it, just be happy," as if it was something you could just turn on and off, by choice, by will. And she found that quite hurtful. That they just didn't understand what she was going through, and what they were saying, was actually quite hurtful for her. Whereas someone who has been through depression, who knows what depression is like, would be less likely to say such things, and more likely to say things that would be helpful, that would be healing, that would be comforting to the person suffering from depression. So that's just one example. There are other examples as well of things that we can learn from going through problems. Thich Nhat Hanh talks about wisdom, how going through problems and difficulties can help us to develop wisdom, and that in turn will help us to become free of suffering and reach liberation and enlightenment, and then be in a position where we can help others. Also in Thich Nhat Hanh's book, he gives the advice, a kind of very simple technique when we are experiencing some difficulty, some painful emotion or problem or whatever. Instead of trying to run away from it or trying to push it away from ourselves or getting into a battle with it, instead take the attitude of being friendly towards it. And even saying, and he says, say hello to it. So he gives this little verse we can use. with our breath. He says, breathing in, I know that I am suffering. Breathing out, I say hello to my suffering. So I really recommend trying that whenever next time you find yourself having some difficulty. Breathing in, I know that I'm suffering, because there you're accepting. You're not trying to run away from it or deny it. You're accepting that it's there. And then breathing out, I say hello to my suffering. So saying hello to suffering means it's a friendly attitude rather than a hostile attitude, rather than seeing suffering as an enemy. And it's really remarkable if you can do this. It may be hard to do, but if you get into the habit of doing it, it makes a huge difference, because then your suffering won't appear like an enemy. And so doing this, will stop this tendency of fighting and rejecting the suffering, or feeling bad about it, feeling guilty about it. And in the Tibetan tradition, we also have this practice of accepting suffering on behalf of others. So this is what Lama Zopa Rinpoche often talks about. Whenever we're going through some difficulty, some problem, to voluntarily take on and accept and go through that difficulty on behalf of others. So you can do that just by saying to yourself, I accept this problem, I accept this suffering, I will go through it, I will go through it. Am I doing that? May all the suffering, all the problems, all the difficulties, and the causes of all these problems of all living beings, may they be totally cleared away. May they cease to exist. So it may not be that anything in the world changes. Nothing major may happen, but something is changing in yourself. Something changes in your own mind. And this is a way of learning to accept suffering rather than pushing it away, and using your suffering, using your difficulty as a way of reminding yourself that there are others who suffer, and you're not the only one, and you want to help them. And so you're taking on the suffering on behalf of them. So these are some ways. Some of them may be hard to understand, hard to relate to, but if any of these ideas is something that sounds doable, something you could do, then I recommend trying it, and to see how it works, having a different attitude about suffering. But saying this doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to find solutions to our problems. Like if you're sick or you injured yourself or in pain, it doesn't mean you shouldn't go to the doctor and try to get medical help. So of course you need to find solutions for your problems. But even if we try to find solutions, the problem might still be there for a while in our life. So while it is still there, then we can use these more psychological or spiritual methods for dealing with the problem and using the problem to bring about something positive, something constructive. And then another thing that I think sometimes happens with Westerners, it doesn't seem to happen so much with Asians, but when we hear about the disturbing emotions, like Buddhism says, we have within us these delusions. Sometimes they're called delusions or disturbing emotions or destructive emotions, such as anger and attachment, greed, jealousy, and so forth. And Buddhism said these are the cause of suffering. And as long as we have these in our mind, then we will continue to suffer. So a big part of Buddhist practice is to decrease and eventually eliminate these disturbing emotions in our mind. So what sometimes happens with Western people is when we hear this kind of statement, this kind of idea, we may feel really bad about ourselves. And I think it's because we have the tendency to identify ourselves with our emotions. You know, we feel, I am my anger, I am my jealousy, I am my greed. Not that we do this deliberately, consciously. I think it's just a habit that we may have. And so if we do identify ourselves with our emotions, and then we hear, oh, those emotions are bad, or they're negative, or they're harmful, they're the cause of suffering, then we tend to feel that means I am bad. Yeah, because we look inside of ourselves and we see, yes, I have anger and I have greed. I have that. Oh, wow, I'm really bad. And it seems that Tibetans and Asians don't have this problem. So I think it has to do with our culture, maybe our Judeo-Christian inheritance. um, so we really have to be careful about this. This is not the way, the ideal way, the correct way that we should respond. I read about one woman who said she was attending some teachings by the Dalai Lama in India for about a week. You know, so many teachings every day for a week. And he was probably talking about this very topic. She said at the end of these teachings, she felt like she was the worst person in the world, probably because she was hearing about all these different, you know, problems, these disturbing emotions, negative emotions, and so on. And she was seeing them in herself, and ended up feeling that way. So that is not healthy. If you notice that happening in your mind, that you're becoming self-hating, self-judgmental, self-critical, having a very negative view of yourself, then that is not the way we're meant to hear these teachings and relate to these teachings. So it isn't always specifically mentioned in Buddhism, but we should have love and compassion for ourselves, just as we have love and compassion for other people. It's just not appropriate to, you know, think, oh, I have to develop love and compassion for all living beings except for me, you know, leave myself out of that, and then beat myself up and hate myself and judge myself and so on. So we tend to do that, maybe unconsciously, not deliberately, but it's important to understand that that is not correct. So if you do notice that happening in your mind, if you do notice thoughts, attitudes of self-judgmentalness, self-criticalness, self-hating, and so on, beating yourself up, please understand that is not what you're supposed to do. And I'm going to be talking about loving kindness and compassion. Hopefully next week I'll start on that.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yes. I will ask, desire, hatred, and delusions. And when I try to identify what's going on inside, I think it can be very mixed. Mixed up. I can feel some emotion against some situation, and at the same time, mixed into it, there is desire for a better situation, and I think it's hard to identify where to focus, to see it, to get close to it. Or I have been thinking about if we could call it all delusion. If it's a way of getting close to a very mixed situation. I think mostly it's very mixed. Could you say something?
You mean there's a mixture of different mental states? It's not always just one very clear disturbing emotion, but a whole mixture of different things? Is that what you're saying?
If I catch myself in being angry, sometimes it's clear. it's very clear. But I have been looking for some times. So I think the most difficult thing is to when I can feel something is going on. It's not a wholesome state that I can recognize, but then I'm stuck there. Okay, it's not a wholesome state, and so what?
What is it?
And I'm going with
Yeah.
what is it? Where to get close to it, to accept it, to take it on me. I'd like to see my say my friend in growth, my enemy, I should say.
Well, I'm not completely sure if I understand what you're saying, but just to share my own experience, because I've been doing this for 40 years, and I see it as, like an onion. An onion has many different
Yes.
layers. Yeah. So you peel off one layer and there's another one, and then you peel off that one, another one, and you keep peeling the layers away and finding other ones. That's been my experience. That as I've continued to study and learn and meditate and practice and look at my mind, it's like peeling away all these different layers. And I'm discovering new things all the time, new surprises. And so I've sort of come to just see it that way. And, I remember sometimes being shocked, like, oh, I have that. Something I thought I didn't have, other people have, but not me. And then I discovered it myself. So I'm kind of used to that now. It's still sometimes shocking, but I'm kind of, I'm trying to say, well, this is good. It's good that I'm discovering this. It's always been there. I just didn't see it before. So now I see it. Now I can do something about it and work on it. So I think in the beginning, we may only be able to recognize or notice or identify some of the disturbing emotions, but not all of them. But as time goes on, I think of it sometimes as like deep sea diving, like our mind is like a very, very deep ocean, and we're kind of going deeper and deeper and deeper and discovering more and more kind of new, interesting creatures that are swimming around in there. And but not to expect that we'll be able to know all of it right from the beginning. Does that make sense? Does that help?
Yeah, I can hear what you say, and I understand what you say, but it do not answer my question. But you did not understand my question, so that's maybe.
I didn't understand your question. You want to try again?
Yes. My experience is when I identify clear something and go into it, take it on me, want to be it, then it flows away, and then I'm clear and mindful. I'm in the now. But if I cannot identify the problem, then it's hard to get close to it because it's somewhat invisible to me. I don't know what to look. It's all over and nowhere. and I think sometimes when it's almost always a mixed situation, mixed emotion, mixed thoughts. What comes first, the thought, the emotion, or there are some patterns and I have experienced when I experience that something is there is both desire and devotion. I want something better and I want something else to go away. And what should I choose? Then I have experienced to just say, oh, it's all illusion. It all based on illusion because there are some kind of identifying. with the problem, and that's in the seed is an illusion, and I experiment, say, okay, I try to focus on the illusionary, the common element of the problem. It helped me some way, but maybe there are some teachings about it. I don't know.
Mm. I mean, as you were talking, I was thinking about an idea that has been bouncing around among Western Buddhists for some time, that we as Westerners, because of our culture and history and society and so on and so forth in the West, which is quite different than Asia, that we might sometimes need additional help that may not be available in the traditional Buddhist teachings. I mean, many Westerners feel this way, that the Buddhist teachings that come to us from Tibetan teachers or Japanese teachers or Thai teachers or whatever are kind of, they've been developed in their cultures, according to their society, their culture, their history, and so on. And it's fine for them, but it may not always match where we are at and the needs that we have.
Maybe need some kind of psychotherapy.
Western, yeah. So that's worth a try. Because this is really what Western therapy is all about. It has developed within the West based on the kind of problems that we Westerners experience. And they have some really excellent methods. So I think it can be not a replacement necessarily, but a complementary. So I'm just saying that as a suggestion. Another way is to just keep going on your own, and I mean, I think in places like Tibet, teachers, the lamas, the great meditating masters and so on, I get the impression they were more accessible. Like every little village, every little area would have their lama, and people could go to that lama. He was there, all the time. They could just go to him and talk to him and get help from him. But often the situation in the West, we don't have lamas, in every street corner that you can go and talk to. And they tend to be few and far between, and they travel a lot, moving around a lot. So when we need them, they may not be there. And even if when they come, they may be too busy to talk to us. So that might be another problem as well, that not having the access to the spiritual masters who have really worked through their problems and be in a position where they can give us that kind of advice. So if you do have a teacher like that, you can go to, fine. Otherwise, you can just try it on your own. But sometimes that can be difficult. Or there's also the option of trying therapy.
It's okay for now.
Okay. You're not falling apart. Yeah.
But maybe just keep on looking for the right teachers. It could be Western, it could be Tibetan, or maybe some Western Buddhists who have gone through some situations like premature trauma. Like premature trauma.
Yep.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Were you going to say something?
No, I have no suggestions.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the Buddha himself, looking at the Buddha's life, he started off with a couple of teachers, but he felt that, that wasn't really what he was looking for. Then he just went and sat by himself in the forest for 6 years or something and just worked through all this stuff on his own. So maybe some people are able to do that, but it might be quite hard.
There are written some great books.
Hmm?
There are written some great books.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think it's important to have patience. Again, like I was saying before, try not to have this, I want to get there now, and be grasping for some result. But just see, I mean, it sounds like for most people, the process of attaining enlightenment and liberation and becoming completely clear and free of all the suffering and the problems takes a long time, maybe even lifetimes. So sometimes we may be impatient and want to get there in a hurry, and that itself can be a problem. And instead, it's important to be patient and keep going and be willing to put up with however long it takes. And because impatience itself is another problem, it's another disturbing emotion. So important to be patient and just keep going and learn from whatever you encounter, whatever is happening, whatever you encounter, even if it may seem chaotic or confusing or whatever, well, that's what's there right now. Okay, let's see what I can learn from this. And I think if you do have that very open attitude, then eventually you will find your way through and get some clarity about it. Is that okay?
I'm okay.
Okay, thank you. So anyway, I just wanted to make that point because the Tibetan teachers, Asian teachers don't necessarily talk about this because they themselves don't seem to have this problem in their culture, in their society. But we tend to have, so just something to look out for. And if you do notice you're in attitudes of being hard on yourself, being mean to yourself, being critical, judgmental with yourself, please understand that that kind of attitude isn't a part of the path. It's actually it's counterproductive to the path. And although it's not, if you do have this problem, it's not something you can just immediately change and become free of. It takes time. But at least try to see that it is something I need to work on. And there are methods to work on it, such as when we meditate on loving kindness and compassion for others, make sure we include ourselves as well, not leave ourselves out. Okay, well, we're kind of running out of time. So does anyone else want to ask a question? Because I'm not going to be able to finish everything I wanted to talk about tonight, but it's okay. Yeah, I was going to talk about rebirth or reincarnation, but that's such a big topic. Well, I'll say a little bit about it tonight, and then we can finish next week. So reincarnation is a part of Buddha's teachings, but it's somewhat controversial. Probably most people in Asia, probably because they're brought up in Buddhist cultures, Buddhist societies, so they're exposed to the idea of rebirth and reincarnation from early on in their life, and most of them don't have problems accepting it. But for those of us who are Westerners, who are not brought up with the idea of reincarnation, and we encounter it, later in life, it can be challenging for us to accept. And there's actually kind of a lot of debate, a lot of discussion going on among Western Buddhists about this whole topic of reincarnation, because there are some well-known Western Buddhist teachers who uh, they're not necessarily coming out and saying there is no reincarnation. They're just saying that they have difficulty accepting it, and they're questioning. Also, there is this doubt that the Buddha really believes in it himself, because there's this one Western teacher and writer who says that it's possible that the Buddha talked about reincarnation only because it was already part of society. It was something that people believed in at that time. So the Buddha just went along with that and talked about it because it was their belief. That maybe he didn't really believe it himself. So this idea came out. But so there's some people who are on that side, who doubt that it's really an important part of Buddhism, and other people who say, no, it is an important part of Buddhism. So if I'm not going to go into all the arguments. If you're interested in that, then you can go on the internet and look it up and find out these different points of view. And my purpose in bringing up this topic is not to try to convince you have to believe in reincarnation. Sometimes people ask me, do you really believe in reincarnation? And I have to say, well, it's hard to have 100% conviction in it, because I have had experiences coming up in my mind which seem like past life memories, but I can't be 100% sure. Maybe my mind is just making these up. Maybe they're just fantasies that my mind is making up. I don't know. But I'm willing to go along with it. I don't have a big problem accepting it and believing in it. And but I do accept that some people have difficulty with that. And people sometimes ask, well, where is the proof? Where's the proof for rebirth? And that's kind of a tricky question, because according to Buddhism, what it is that takes rebirth, what it is that continues to exist after we die, is our mind, our consciousness, and more specifically, just part of our mind. And the mind in Buddhism is a non-material and non-physical phenomena. It's not a physical thing. It's not something you can see with your eyes. It's not something you can measure with instruments. So if people want some kind of concrete, physical, material proof that when a person dies, their mind leaves and goes to another life, there is no such proof, because so far scientists haven't managed to produce an instrument that is able to detect the presence of the mind and, trace the mind as it's moving, because it's a non-physical thing. Maybe one day they will come up with such an instrument, but in the meantime, that's not possible. But there is a lot of material from other sources. For example, people who can remember past lives. And he's passed away now, but there was an American professor by the name of Ian Stevenson, who was a psychologist and psychiatrist. And he spent many years, decades, doing research into people who can remember past lives. And he has thousands of cases of such people, and he documented them very, very well, very scientifically. And there's a book, one book, maybe several books, one book that I read many years ago called 20 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation by Ian Stevenson. And for me, that was really helpful to read, because I found it very difficult to understand, to come up with another possible explanation for how it is these people, often children, would have this knowledge which their parents didn't have, neighbors didn't have, nobody around them had, but they knew about this person, who died somewhere else, and they knew a lot of information about this person. And it all seemed to be coming from within themselves. And they would talk about it in first person. They say, I was that person. And then they give all this information about it. Very difficult to find another explanation for that kind of phenomena other than reincarnation. So reading that book was very helpful for me. And anyway, that's one. I'll talk about more next week if you're interested. More sources of information. So like I'm saying, I'm not trying to convince you about reincarnation, but my suggestion is just try to have an open mind about it and not completely reject the idea because it's hard to accept, because it's not something that most people in the West believe. Although research has been done and surveys come up with, they say that, in the West, there's anywhere from 15 to 40% of people do believe in reincarnation, even though it's not part of our culture. So there are a lot of people who believe in it. So try to at least keep an open mind and do research and explore this topic, and don't just close your mind to it. So I'll talk more about it next week, and also why it is a significant topic in Buddhism. It's not just some topic of curiosity, but it does play a crucial role in the Buddhist explanation of things and the Buddhist path. Okay, so we'll stop there for tonight, and thank you for coming. Hope it's been helpful for you. And let's just take a few moments to make a mental dedication of the positive energy we have created by being here tonight and doing meditation, then listening to and thinking about this talk. And I'm sure we all did these things with a good motivation, with an altruistic motivation, wanting to benefit others, wanting to benefit the world as much as possible. So we've created some good energy here tonight. Let's dedicate this energy that it will be beneficial to as many other people and beings as possible. We'll bring about peace and happiness, an end of suffering, and help all of us get closer to enlightenment. Okay. Good night.
Sorry,